Ligand should generate $120 million in cash flow over the next 12 months, growing at 20% annually. There are many commercial stage partnerships driving this growth, with one example being Filspari, which offers growth from expanding into new indications and geographies. Join Todd and me as we look at existing and future arrangements that will drive future growth for Ligand Pharmaceuticals.
And this really should be a compounding strategy. In fact, it is. We're simply reinvesting our cash flows now. We're growing at 20%, and that rate of growth should compound over time because our cash flows are going to grow, our average investment size is going to go up, and the returns, I think, will be pretty steady here. We're pricing our deals the same way equity is priced because we're taking equity-like risk. But it is a pretty inefficient market for what we're doing. And I think in general, there's some real challenges in biotech financing.
Todd, how much cash flow do you think you're going to generate over the next 12 months or so?
We'll generate about 120 million.
Okay.
Cash flow.
So if you're growing at 20%, that means you're probably going to get maybe 145 million a year after that. Does that sound about right? So you'll be able to invest in and that compounding that we talked about. I mean, that's an outstanding approach that I think maybe some people don't grasp, at first look, that you guys have that perhaps others don't have.
Yeah. We have over 80 development stage partnerships, and we have about 13 major commercial products that are driving our growth, including, our lead growth drivers now are Filspari. It's just at the beginning of its growth trajectory. And we think if FSGS is approved, they're going to exceed $2 billion in sales on that product, would be our guess. Or our estimate.
So Filspari, just so people know, and tell me if I'm wrong, but you have the primary indication, but there's also another indication, FSGS, which I think you said, and then there's also geographical expansion as well. So you kind of have all these from like 1 to 4, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's kind of geometric growth there.
Yeah,
multiple reasons.
Better way to say it.
Growing the number of indications, growing the geographies we're in, and the product just launched in the U.S., so it's just growing in the U.S. as well. And some very positive things have happened in favor of Filspari. I think the Parasol group, which was a group of leading nephrologists, the FDA, other thought leaders in industry, kind of reviewing the endpoint measurements. So what was really most meaningful was a surrogate endpoint for IgA nephropathy, and they've really anchored around proteinuria, which there's very clear data for Filspari on that. So that's very favorable. I think that's the right conclusion as well, importantly, clinically, but that's very good for Filspari in terms of measuring its efficacy. And that's true in FSGS as well. So they've now filed, and it should be an accelerated approval, which would mean that could be approved sometime in September of this year.
Okay.
And although there's proportionately fewer patients, I don't remember exactly, 60% or so of the number of patients there are in IgA nephropathy, they're probably going to use a higher volume of the drug. So the revenue generation in an FSGS will be about equal to the opportunity set in IgA nephropathy. We have a 9% royalty on that drug. And so it's a $2 billion drug. That's $180 million of 100% margin cash flow to us in a single asset. We also have a 3% royalty in Ohtuvayre. And
would you say that's your second most interesting asset after Filspari, Ohtuvayre?
Yeah, in terms of really growth driving, right?
Okay.
Now, yes. Okay. And they're doing an amazing job launching that product at Verona. Wells Fargo put out a really good note. I was kind of knew this. I knew it was going well, but they quantified it. The analyst there, blanking on his name, quantified it and showed all of the COPD launches in the last several years and where they stood in terms of the patient penetration and the ramp rate. And this is the most successful COPD launch in history so far. And including Trilogy and some of the other really big drugs that are out there. So they're on their way to a blockbuster. If this continues for another couple quarters at the same growth rate, this should definitely exceed $3 billion in total sales. So that's another 90 million or so in cash flow to us. And we have a number of other shots on goal that are very attractive. Capvaxive is growing very nicely. We have a low single royalty on that. Merck's doing a great job marketing that drug. A lot of good partners. But one thing about our model is, our partners are doing all the work and making all the money for us, right? We invest capital or license technology to them early on, and then we're passive partners. And that's part of our strategy. I mean, we want to be passive. And the reason we want to be passive is because there's lots of talented teams out there. There are lots of good assets out there. And we want to be capital allocators because that's a much more leverageable business model.
Right.
So we try to be selective in terms of the teams and the assets that we partner with. And I think we've made some good historical decisions. I think we're making some good decisions now. It's really the combination of those two things that matter at the end of the day in terms of how these things go.